miss the intel about the next generation of Bulldogs. This is Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger.
Let's go, I'm a Bulldog.
Hello, DawgNation, and welcome into Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. After the loss of Brett Collier this past weekend, UGA goes from number 1 to number 2, and then with the addition of Anthony Lonon Jr. on Saturday, they go back up to number 1, and that gives me the sense that we're going to be seeing a lot of this in the offseason, where it's just a back-and-forth game of what's next.
It's still dogs on top, Kaylee, right? Yeah. Most people would have thought, Collier, it's kind of funny. Don't know if we see this often, Kaylee. Last week, our top targets were 1, Brett Collier, 2, Anthony Lonon. Both of them come off the board. Both of them, their commitments move their team to the number 1 team in the country. It was a big feel-good thing in Clark Central in Athens off Baxter Street. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. But, Kaylee, we've got a Shakespearean topic to talk about today. It's not to be or not to be, right?
Right. We're going to call it to flip or not to flip. That's the first thing we're going to talk about in today's episode of Before the Hedges. And then we will follow up with what it was like being at the Anthony Lonon commitment on Saturday. And then the number 1 prospect in the state of Georgia, the 5-star edge, LaDainian Guyton, is set to commit Thursday, August 7th, which is tomorrow. And I think Georgia fans are a little bit disappointed that Georgia may not be closer in this race, but we'll tell you why it may not be Georgia's fault. And then we'll do our class breakdown where we cover all of the commits in the 2026 class. And then, as Jeff mentioned, 2 top targets come off the board. So we're basically just having to revise the list as we go. And you'll see some of those names in this first segment, which is to flip or not to flip. At this point, the majority of additions in the 2026 class are going to have to come from flipping guys from other programs. So, Jeff, how does Georgia decide who's worth it to go after if they're already in another program?
I think the main thing, Kaylee, is just they see value in it. And what I mean by that is they like a guy. Maybe he's committed to a G4 school. Maybe he's committed to a P4 school. Maybe he's committed somewhere in the ACC, and all of a sudden they see growth for the senior year. Maybe just plays a lot better. Maybe his body changes. Maybe he's at a new position, and that's like, okay, we think that guy can play for us. Kind of the way Georgia kind of saw Anthony Lonon. Initially, it was Coach DeRibe who was like, I think he can play with us. And like that kind of got Georgia's attention, and they initially thought with his size, he might be out on the edge, maybe another Chaz Chambliss type. But then what they did is they saw him put on weight, and they're like, hey, he could probably play for us in the middle. He could probably play for Trey Scott. And so it's kind of constantly evaluation because, I mean, right now, Kaylee, you're either right now as a whole, every staff in the country, they're either playing defense on their guys or they're going to go try to flip somebody else's guys.
So we're going to talk about 2 guys in particular that are becoming top targets for Georgia at this point. But I think we have to note that it's August, and it's so strange that we're even discussing the fact that the rest of Georgia's guys in the class are going to have to come from flips. I mean, we're months away from signing day.
Yeah, it's different. When we were at the Corky Kell luncheon this week, normally, Kaylee, there's like 7 guys I need to talk to, and they need to talk about, hey, who are you going to go visit? Who are you going to take your officials to? And really, there were just maybe a couple. I kind of felt like it was the desert, and there were tumbleweeds blowing across the desert. The one thing you will say while looking at this class and as a whole is everything just happens so much faster these days. And I guess that's kind of a byproduct of the world we live in right now.
So the first guy we're going to talk about is somebody that you had the chance to see at the Corky Kell luncheon the other day, and that's going to be the 4-star offensive tackle Tyler Chuckyum out of South Paulding High School, who is currently a Florida commit. Now, the only offensive tackle currently in the class is Ekene Ogboko. So what do the Dogs like about Tyler, and what about his skill set can make him an asset to this class?
First thing I want people to peep as they watch these highlights is just started playing football in the 9th grade. He was a former soccer player, Kaylee. He was a striker, if you can believe that. one of those
Whoa.
quick athletic guys up top. And obviously he's put on some pounds. He's put on some height since then, because you don't see too many 6'6", 290-pound strikers.
For those of you who watch is real football here in the United States,
Yeah.
a striker is the one that scores the goals in soccer. So typically like a little bit slimmer and a little bit quicker. So the fact that we're talking about him as an offensive tackle, like that's a huge transition.
Yeah, let me speak college football here. Basically, your Sokovie Whites, your Lad McConkeys,
Yes.
and your Zachariah Branches. Those are the guys that are your strikers. So Nate Frazier, stuff like that. But I think it's interesting with everybody calls him Big Chew, because he committed to Florida, and everybody likes a little Georgia-Florida home cooking in-state battle. But he saw Georgia in the spring. Georgia just kept kind of kicking the tires. And when it was time to make his decision and take his official visits, it was Cincinnati, Ole Miss, Florida State, and Florida. Commits to Florida on June 16th, and he was pretty much all good with it. Now, he's told us a couple things. He said that he's not going to hold any bitterness towards Georgia or penalize them because it took him so long to offer.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to sit there and, give Georgia its shot. He's going to listen to what they have to say. He thinks he might need to take an official visit. He'd love to do that for the Bama or the Texas game, like everybody else in the country that's going to be in that stadium on those days. But it's interesting how he told me, Kaylee, he was at Georgia for the spring practice and he kind of filed it away. He goes, it would be pretty nice to play here. So I ask a reporter's question. I go, like, Tyler, you're going to give Georgia a chance. What does that mean? Like, what do you need to hear from Georgia? And he goes, well, I need to see about their development. Need to see how the relationship kind of develops. And then ultimately, he's going to choose the best place for himself. So if he's looking at Georgia, he can look and see that there's really only one tackle in this class. That helps out a lot when you're at a place like Georgia. And then what he's going to have to do is he's going to judge the new feelings about Georgia with kind of the solid, because he's saying the right things, Kaylee. He's saying Florida commitment's good, even though the Florida coaches have already told him, they said, hey, man, we knew this was coming. We knew you were the type of player that eventually Georgia would see that you're really good. And other thing that's interesting about the timing, Kaylee, August the 1st, and this was another benchmark we can talk about over the last week in recruiting. August the 1st was the first time that schools could send out an official written offer to prospects. And that's when Georgia decided to drop the mic and send the offer up to Douglasville for Tyler Big Chew Chukum.
Well, that's the thing about flips, too, is that it really is a two-way street. Like, you have to meet the middle, because not only do you have to be a target on Georgia's list, but you yourself have to be willing to change that decision that you've already implemented for yourself. And obviously with a flip, like, this isn't something that's going to happen in a matter of days. If he wants to take an official visit or continue that relationship, this is something that's going to have to happen over the course of weeks, if not a couple of months.
Yeah, I think the big thing that we had our discussion and talked to his coach and everything else, the big thing that stood out to me is, again, I said, are you going to look at Georgia objectively in terms of just what they offer, what the fit's like, the development, how they put offensive tackles in the league, how they're kind of a bigger fish program? And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. He's like, I'm not going to think about Georgia negatively because it took them so long or they waited so long to offer. He's just glad he got the offer when it came.
So there's another prospect in the state of Georgia that seems to be on this flip watch list. We talked about him a little bit last week. It's the running back out of Sandy Creek, Amari Latimer, who is currently committed to Wisconsin. And Georgia has missed out on a lot of running backs this year. I mean, Derek Cooper, and then it doesn't look like they're going to be in the mix at all for Savion Hyder. Now, you kind of made the point that Georgia doesn't have to have another running back in this 2026 class because they can go and get one out of the portal. But at least for me, having only Bo Walker in last year's class and then Jay Lamar currently only in this class, like, this is one of those players that I would probably move some things around for if I'm Georgia, just to guarantee you that you're going to have at least two.
It's interesting, Kaylee, because a lot of people will look at this and see that Georgia's got to make Amari Latimer feel loved, and he's got to make him feel now like a priority. Like, look at this film. When I break him down and when I watch his tape, he's more like, like a matador, like the guy that's like, he wants to take on every bull and he wants to say, come on, let's see what you got. I don't think that will work in the SEC, but you do see a guy that can be a productive back for Georgia. in the SEC. Like right there, Kaylee, does he have that home run? Does he have that eraser speed? No, because some people are catching up to him right there. But he's going to be very hard to get on the ground. Of course, he would really fit in well at Wisconsin, but he looks at it. You know how offensive linemen, kind of gauge their worth by pancakes?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's trying to get pancakes of his own by just road grading and steamrolling guys.
Well, the interesting thing about him, too, if you're watching this on film, you'll see both offensive and defensive highlights because he also plays middle linebacker for Sandy Creek as well. So just that extra athleticism, this looks like somebody that Georgia could potentially work with in the future. And, one thing to keep in mind, too, is that between Tyler and Amari, both of them currently live in the state of Georgia. So, the coordinators and players can have access to them all the time. Does that give Georgia any sort of advantage when it comes to potentially flipping players like this?
I think the advantage is the location advantage is it's going to be closer for their families to come see them. I mean, Kaylee, right now, I can't think of a recruiting edge that Georgia doesn't have yet, that they haven't built over the last 10 years with Kirby Smart. I think they just want to see like what the depth chart looks like. I do kind of feel like Georgia, to me, can't go 2 classes, which they are currently doing right now with only 1 high school back in the class. Mm-hmm. I think eventually renting guys out of the portal is going to get a little more expensive, and you're kind of forcing yourself to make sure you hit on that veteran guy as well when you don't have a veteran guy in the room. So, I mean, I think that's something to think about there. The other thing we've got to stress here, Kaylee, is Georgia is still evaluating and finding guys. We bring this guy up a lot, Dennis Uzuchukwu, guy that Georgia basically saw in October last year, a guy that kind of figured out his game. And there's a lot of players like that where Georgia it's still very possible for Georgia to find a guy that they like, that they feel like that he can play, even though he doesn't have an offer right now.
So out of the 2 that we've talked about this far, which one is more likely to be a dog when signing day rolls around?
I'd probably say Tyler, just because I just feel like Amari's a guy that, he didn't even take an official visit to Georgia. I don't think he got one of those official offers, or at least even tweeted it out on August the 1st. So, again, I think it's just Georgia just consistently. It's going to feel like on one end that Georgia is always late to the party, where at least Georgia has kind of been keeping that stovetop hot and that saucepan hot a little bit with Tyler a little bit. And then with Amari, I mean, he's got a good fit in Wisconsin, and he's always kind of felt like, is Georgia going to come around? So I think right now I would say Tyler, even though he's committed to Florida, and we know how Kirby Smart and that staff love to flip Gators and to humble the Gators at every opportunity. I think right now, I think Tyler would probably be the more likely of the 2, but I'll say this, Kaylee, I don't know if either the two are really likely, but I think Georgia's going to have to roll up its sleeves and go to work on them.
So on the flip side of things,
yeah,
just as quickly as UGA could flip someone, another school could just as easily come in and grab someone from Georgia's class, especially with as much talent as there is. Who is Georgia having to kind of play defense with at this point in time?
Yeah, right now the name is Justice Fitzpatrick for a lot of reasons. And I'm kind of watching it because it's kind of funny. Everybody knows Justice's older brother is Minka. Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of funny how this works, Kaylee, but his older brother, who's been in the league and been a Pro Bowler for years, and Kirby Smart helped put him on the map back at Alabama, he just got traded back to Florida, traded back to Miami. So there's a chance for the entire Fitzpatrick family to be in South Florida together. And obviously Miami is going to throw some change at him. Texas is also going to throw some change. Justice has been quoted in reports this week saying those are the 2 schools that are still trying to work on him and flip him. And the thing DawgNation won't really like to read in some of his quotes is when he says there's really not a lot of difference between all of them. There's really not a big gap. But he's committed to Georgia for a reason, and he really only took the Georgia official and then shut everything else down. I do know this from speaking to people down there in Fort Lauderdale in that area. They tell me that as long as Georgia keeps its word and keeps its end of the bargain in terms of promises that are made or promises kept, they think that this recruitment and this commitment will stick. Commitment actually means something a lot to Fitzpatrick and his family. And again, The location thing might have made it a lot more interesting, but one thing that Minka really values and Kirby really values is that long-standing relationship they built. Kirby, if you catch him speaking about Minka at all over the years, he still credits and lists Minka as one of the smartest football players he's ever coached.
I feel like something that we've seen a lot, especially with this class in particular, is guys immediately shutting down their recruitment. Is that something you think we'll see from Justice potentially?
Well, he's already said he's done it once. It seems like you have to shut it down over and over again. And remember, shut it down, Kaylee, is different definitions to other things. Like, lots of times we have fun and we talk about these recruiting relationships as the high school relationships they are. So shut down means you're not talking to anybody else. But if you're still talking to other people or at least hearing them out, I don't know if that's the classic definition of shutdown. And really with a lot of this class, I want to say one more thing about Justice is, Kaylee, he becomes vital to this class, not only because he's elite, I think he's one of the top 5 commitments in this class, but because now the unfortunate things happening with Chase Calicut, Justice is your cornerback target. He is your cornerback commitment in this class. Sure, Caden Harris can play it as well, but I think the loss of Calicut, who I don't expect to sign and stay in this class because he's got other more important things in his life right now, I think the loss of Calicut kind of supersizes the need to hold on to Fitzpatrick.
So we'll kind of continue this conversation when we get into the class breakdown later. We'll go by each guy and determine who are the ones that Georgia absolutely can't lose to someone else. But before that, we will do a review of our Anthony Lonon commitment on Saturday, which I think you and I both realize there's a lot of personal ties with this kid, and I think that DawgNation is really resonating with that. And then we'll also talk about the 5-star edge, LaDamian Guyton, who will make his decision really soon. But first, we want to remind you that here on Before the Hedges, we are brought to you by Kroger. And now that school is back, you can definitely tell because the traffic is a lot worse. But if you've got kids in school or grandkids in school, it takes up a lot of your time. And so you can just make your life a little bit easier by signing up for Kroger Boost, because not only do you get the double fuel points, but you also get the free grocery delivery. So that way, when your kids or grandkids are home, you can spend that time with them and just have the groceries delivered to your door so you can give more time back to yourself and back to your family. And you can do that by signing up at Kroger.com/boost. Again, that's Kroger.com/boost. So you and I have been on the commitment world tour this year, and we'll probably have maybe one or two more by the time the year is over. But we got to go to one on Saturday with Anthony Lonon that I just felt was really special. He's a hometown kid, a Georgia legacy. So many people in that community showed up. And now that we've had a few days to really reflect on that decision, what are the things that have kind of stuck with you throughout the last couple of days?
First of all, Kaylee, the way you bring it up, it makes me want to think of, remember those concert T-shirts where they had all the dates on the back? I feel like we need one of those for everywhere we've been. But look at that crowd right there. Like, that's one of those, you see some reporters in the front row, but you see a lot of well-wishers. They were in the weight room there at Clark Central. You see a lot of media assembled, but I know there's a little bit of pomp and circumstance, and there's a lot of people around the Clark Central program that opened their arms and kind of celebrated Anthony on this day.
So in thinking back on the whole thing, there was one thing that stuck with me a lot this weekend, and it was a quote that actually came from his dad, Anthony Lonon Jr., who was once a Bulldog himself. If you missed it on Saturday, hear this right here for us.
The fact of the matter is, he's been a dog from day one. But at the end of the day, we still had to let him make the decision for himself. I can remember, I told a couple of reporters, I told a couple of people, I can remember, when he first started playing football, I was out of town. His mom came to me and said, AJ wants to play football. And I wasn't gonna let him play at first. I was like, no, we're gonna wait a little later, let him get a little older. And some of these kids in this room right here, they were already playing, and AJ got a little upset, and he was like, I want to play. So she took him to the Y, and then they explored some teams, and then we ended up at Highland Park. And, when I got home, he had his uniform and everything already. And I was like, and then he ran up to me before I could even get out the car. And his mom probably don't even know this. And he was like, Dad, I'm going to be good in football. And I looked at him and I said, how you know you're going to be good? And he said, because you were good. And, I was done. I was sold right then. I was like, all right, let's go. Let's go.
So first, you had the very first thing he said, which is he's been a dog since day one. And then the story about him telling his dad, I'm going to be good because you were. Like, it's one of the realest and most authentic and genuine moments that I felt like we got to experience on any of the commitments that we went to this year. And to know that his dad could have pushed him in one direction, but I think it was very evident that he let him make that decision on his own. And if you're a Georgia fan, that's exactly what you want to hear too, knowing that there was that mutual respect between him and the program. But I mean, Mom was amazing, the community was amazing, but Dad, you could tell, just tugged on the heartstrings of every single person in that room.
I feel like this is a creative recruit,
Yes.
The creative player, because like the background about Anthony is really special because Mom has a double dog, and one of those is a law degree from the University of Georgia, and she does not play. She ran that ceremony like she was Joe Montana in the Super Bowl. Like she had invocation, she had people coming in, coming out. And then that reflects in Anthony because what did we learn? 4.2 GPA. We learned that he's the vice president of his class at Clark Central. We learned that he's going to enroll early. We learned that he was the only player that David Perno, former Georgia baseball coach David Perno, the only player in his 10 years at Clark Central that never played a JV game or a freshman game. Why was he not doing that? Because he was already in the varsity. His first 2 games at Clark Central, he started as a freshman with a broken hand, and Perno had a quip. I thought it was really funny. He's like, we got some guys that go home with a runny nose, and I've got a freshman here that's starting 2 games with a broken hand. So you see a lot of this stuff with Anthony and the fact that he's a legacy. Kaylee, I just feel like we talked about this in our pre-production earlier, is that there's so much about college football that feels like a business. It feels transactional. Mm-hmm. It feels bags here and bags there. And I think DawgNation resonates a little bit with Anthony's story because it was a lot of stuff. Like he didn't have an offer on January the 1st, and he emailed 100 teams and sent his film out to 100 teams, got all the offers. His last offer was from the University of Georgia, and that's the school he ultimately chooses.
Yeah, and one thing that we could also discuss, and I thought that Brandon Adams did a good job of pointing this out the other day too, is he's got the 4-star now. He's somebody that's going to eventually climb up in the ranks the more that people see him. But you look at the ranking and you look at some of the other defensive linemen in the class, and yeah, there might be some guys that are more naturally talented, but I think that Anthony Lonon Jr. has a really high football IQ. He's one of the more versatile players in this entire defensive line class, and this is somebody that I think is going to quickly make a name for himself once he gets some time in with the program and be somebody in this 2026 class that we look back on and say that they were severely underrated.
Well, here's why, Kaylee, and I wish we had this on video, so I'll do my best to recreate it. Probably easily one of my favorite stories in reporting on this 2026 class. It was like, I'll never forget, we were wrapping up at Clark Central, and I went and talked to his mom. And his mom was great. She gave me a story, and then I went and talked to AJ about it. So get this, picture this, Kaylee. He's sitting there on his official visit, and I would call it cajones, I guess. I would call it marbles. Young folks, young coaches would call it stones. He looks Kirby Smart in the eye on his official visit, and he says, I don't want this offer because I'm a legacy. I want this offer because you see value in me. And otherwise, I'm not down with this. And Kirby looks him at him in his face, and he's like, all right, first of all, very admirable for a 17-year-old kid. He just turned 17, by the way, to ask this of Kirby Smart, really questioning the validity of his scholarship. And Kirby says, all right, now listen, you know how many guys I played with that have sons by now? He's like, I don't do favors. He says, well, here's what happens. we like you for your twitchiness, the way you move. We like you for the way you can get off the ball. And you're right. We don't have a lot of guys your size. But then he said, we also don't have a lot of guys that move the way you do. And I thought that was one of those really real conversations we got a chance to share with DawgNation, because I love that story about AJ.
And if you missed the video from Saturday, make sure to go to our DawgNation YouTube page under videos, and you can see more clips from the ceremony itself. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page and ring that bell so you can get notifications anytime that DawgNation posts on our YouTube page. We're going to shift gears to something else, maybe something that was unexpected. We noticed on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, I believe, the 5-star edge LaDainian Guyton, who is the #1 player in the state of Georgia, announced he would be making his commitment decision tomorrow on August 7th. And there was something a little bit off about the graphic that was posted. And usually when a top prospect in the country announces his recruitment or his decision, they'll have schools on the bottom, like the top 3 or top 5 schools that they're picking between. And there's nobody on the bottom of that list. So that leads me to believe that there may not be a couple of schools in the mix, Georgia included in that.
I felt, Kaylee, well, first of all, just when Dog fans are ready to settle some scores with the Longhorns for 2 players in the 2026 class, here comes some more Texas-sized trouble with Texas Tech in the 2027 class. And Kaylee, I guess first of all, it's a good thing that there's so many 2027 edges that are really talented.
And we'll talk about them too.
But the backstory on this is that there's a guy, like a Texas oil man, energy czar. I know you guys out there have been watching Landman, right? Well, there's a guy with John Hamm type leading character, main character money here. And he sold his energy company. Basically, he's got billions or whatever. He's now like the head of the board of regents for Texas Tech. He's a former player. He's a former NFL guy. Guy's name is Cody Campbell. And it was very interesting, Kaylee. There's only one school that LaDainian Guyton visited this summer. Do you know what that school that was?
It's Texas Tech.
It wasn't go to try the sweet tea in Lubbock, Texas. Let me tell you that. It wasn't to do that. And so he visits. All of a sudden, he's the #2 player in the country, not just the #1 player in Georgia. And he's really good, Kaylee. Like, the one thing we got to make sure people realize is, I'm going to take you back. I think it was 2 state championships ago. Cedar Grove was playing Savannah Christian, and everybody was there to see all of Savannah Christian, not just Elijah Griffin, right? And Bo Walker was in that game too, right? The guy that's tearing it up right now in UGA camp. But there were several UGA coaches in attendance, and you could just notice the way they were already watching LaDainian Guyton, not just Elijah Griffin. You know, like that meme that's on social media of Kirby with the popcorn from Justin Fields? Yes. That was the look that they were giving. They were like, oh, all right, this guy's already got that. Kaylee, too, man, I know a lot of coaches in the 912, the Coastal Empire, that sometimes tell me, and it's not at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, they're telling me that sometimes they were a little bit more scared of LaDainian Guyton than they were of Elijah Griffin. So this is a terrific, fantastic player, and I expect the price tag for Guyton to go ahead and shut all this down is going to be millions.
Well, all the crystal balls already have him going to Texas Tech. It's not like it's some big secret, but a lot of Georgia fans were disappointed that Georgia wasn't a bigger factor in all this because he is from the state of Georgia. But I just don't know if there was anything that Georgia could have done about it to match that, because Texas Tech clearly knew what they wanted and they're willing to go the distance or do whatever it takes to ensure that they end up with LaDainian Guyton, which leads me to have to ask, if this guy is willing to pour all of this money into the Texas Tech program, does that potentially become a competitor on the recruiting trail? Not even just for like Georgia, but also the people that Georgia compete with, like Texas and Miami and Oregon. Are we going to see Texas Tech rise in the ranks?
Well, you already have, because it's kind of interesting. Now, first of all, Kaylee, let me say this one moment. It still feels very unregulated how you can influence decisions like this, because this is a 2027 prospect. And, like, if they're going to give this amount of money to an edge, what does that do for the rest of their class? But Kaylee, Texas Tech has kind of been that silent wave kind of coming for a while. There was a lot of media, a lot of reports of how Texas Tech had a war chest last transfer portal cycle, and they spent like $15 million on their transfer portal class this year. Like Texas Tech is wanting to stamp itself as a bona fide big fish. And one of the things we noticed when the first predictions came out for LaDainian Guyton, I think we have this slide, but this is Cody Campbell. This was that energy czar. First of all, let's look at the date, look at the timestamp on that one. So this was a little bit while ago in July. He is replying. He's basically quote tweeting LaDainian Guyton right there. Lots of overrated prospects and fake 5 stars, but Damian Guyton is the realest of deals. No program has better coaches, better facilities, better booster and alumni support, or more momentum. Come on home and become part of the Red Raider family. First of all, man's entitled to his opinion. He is a very successful businessman, but I think there were some eyebrow-raising statements in there as well. You're talking about a program that doesn't have a history of first-rounders, that doesn't have a history of college football playoffs yet. They're trying to get in there, and heck, they might be in there, but here's the plot twist, Kaylee. What if the team that Georgia has to worry about long range now is not the Texas Longhorns, it's the Texas Tech Red Raiders, or, behind door number 2, some feel that these schools may cannibalize each other on the trail, trying to figure out who's who.
Yes, I have 2 thoughts on this. To your first point, Rome was not built in a day. The course of the Texas Tech football program isn't going to change with especially one player, but it's going to take you a couple of cycles to even become competitive. But I was telling Jeff before the show that this reminds me so much of the whole reason that the thing with the SMU death penalty happened a few decades ago, because all these guys from different Texas schools were tired of other Texas teams having success, so they were willing to do whatever it took to make their team become successful. And so I could see the Texas schools begin to start eating each other alive before it became a real problem. But I'm not, at this point in time, and I may eat my words someday in the future, I'm not all that concerned with Texas Tech as a football program on the recruiting trail. Maybe they go steal a few guys, but I don't think that you see that translate onto the field until they have multiple successful cycles of recruits.
I don't just know if it's sustainable as you trying to be the highest bidder for one guy. Now, Kaylee, they may have it in their coffers. They may have had their roster already front-loaded where they have $20 million to throw at the 2027 recruiting class, and they probably do. But, you know, a lot of Georgia fans, they come up to me and they say, hey, man, I don't guess this is ego stuff right here or pocket watching, but they're like, hey, man, does Georgia not have their own billionaire? Do they not have their own billionaire? I don't know. There's tons of billionaires in the world.
We don't have any oil here.
Don't have any oil. And the peanuts and pecans and tomatoes and peach trees, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So this is very interesting. I think it's happening really early. I think it's the type of thing that will shut down. I'm going to answer one of your probable questions, Kaylee. I think it will stick because the numbers will stick. It's kind of one of those things where, you just imagine like whether this is a Hollywood scene and there's a bunch of guys at a poker table and all of a sudden Texas Tech, because Texas Tech is doing what Texas A&M did a couple years ago as well.
Oh, with the 2020s.
Yeah, and didn't work out. But they're pushing all their chips to the table. And maybe Kirby Smart in Georgia is like sitting there going, we've seen this movie before, Justice Terry. Like, go ahead, have at it, Hoss.
Sure.
You won this one. We'll see how it works out on the field for you.
Well, the good news is, assuming that this doesn't go Georgia's way, because that feels like the most likely situation, the 2027 Edge class as a whole, nationally and in the state of Georgia, is loaded with talent. So even without LaDainian Guyton, Georgia still has a ton of options on the board. For the purpose of the show today, we'll take a look at 3 that Georgia is paying heavy attention to. One of them is going to be the 5-star edge, DJ Jacobs, who is the son of former Bulldog David Jacobs. He's currently the number 3 edge, number 11 player overall, according to the 247 composite. Georgia's been after this guy for a while now. So with LaDainian going to another team, I think that gives Georgia more time to focus on DJ Jacobs.
So I think, Kaylee, he's known as big time, and he really is big time. He feels like he's already the school icon or the school ambassador for Blessed Trinity right now in Roswell. I always thought this, Kaylee, there's no way Georgia was going to get both Jacobs and Guyton. It just wasn't going to happen. That would have been about a $3 million tab to get both of them. So I think it simplifies the matter. One thing to go on that board right now, and Kaylee, there's a lot of great edges in this class. Unfortunately, one of them is in Louisiana that's probably going to be property of LSU, and there's one of them in Maryland that's probably going to be property of Maryland. But then there's Jacobs in Georgia, and I guess we can never say never because most people would have thought Guyton would have been Georgia bound as well. But there's a guy, and listen, this is a little something where Georgia's got to get his game right. Because right now, I spoke to KJ Green out of Stevenson and Stone Mountain.
Yeah, Stone Mountain.
And this was at the Future 50 over the summer. He spoke for 10 minutes about his recruiting. I don't think he mentioned Georgia once. That means Georgia was not prioritizing him like other schools were. Florida, Alabama, other schools were. But it kind of made sense because knowing the board a little bit, Georgia shooting the shot with Guyton, definitely continuing the legacy and the long-term commitment, long-term commitment, long-term recruiting there with DJ Jacobs. So Green's a guy that I think Georgia's going to have to get back in on. The other guy, Zane Rowe, I believe Georgia offered him when he was in the 8th grade. He's out of Texas. So wouldn't it be turnabout as fair play if Georgia goes and gets one out of Texas to lasso one of those guys after Texas gets one out of the state of Georgia? Now, Rowe's one guy that's a little big now. He's already in the 250, 260 range. And what does that mean, Kaylee? When you're already that big in high school, that means you're going to move inside. You're going to play on the interior D-line when you're in college. But that's a school, Georgia. Zane Rowe told me that Georgia's going to be one of his in-game schools. Kids like to drop that Avengers reference now whenever they talk about the school that's going to be with it, be in it till the end right now. But it's a good thing that there are so many edge prospects around the country and also in the state of Georgia because Guyton is an early surprise for the class of 2027.
So a few thoughts on this because currently the only edge in the 2026 class is Kamari Brooks. I don't see Georgia adding another guy in that position group, especially because they signed 3 in the class before. Now, we've seen them take 3, so it is possible that they take 3 in 2027, but when you look at their rankings, they're all top 100 players. So just from a financial standpoint, you aren't going to be able to take all 3 because that's a lot of money. So if Georgia gets, let's say, 2 of the 3 on this board, who would you look to?
You definitely look to DJ Jacobs. I think he becomes probably when we start rolling out the top targets.
Is he going to be number 1?
He probably is going to be number 1. He was already a top 5 guy, but you got to get that edge guy, especially after getting 1 the year previously, Kaylee. But let's talk accounting for a little bit. I know there's some accounting majors that are accounting degrees that are watching the show right now.
You're really going to have to hold my attention here.
Okay, so here's the accounting.
Not my strong suit.
I'm going to tell you what.
Girl
Kaylee.
math this for me.
Girl math. Well, this is some dog math. So how about this, Kaylee? What about, LaDainian Guyton's really good.
Okay.
But you know whose name keeps popping up when I keep my ear to the ground about fall camp so far? Chase Linton.
I'm not surprised by that.
Chase Linton is going to be a dude at Georgia. And you sit there and you go, well, are you going to want to have to pay Chase Linton and Isaiah Gibson and Quintavious Johnson? You're going to pay those guys in year 2, year 3? Or are you going to worry about getting this freshman here that's really special? So you got to wonder, what would you rather have? True freshman in 2027, or would you rather have Chase Linton in year 3 in Athens? Because obviously you're going to take the guy that's been in the Georgia program for a while.
Pay the guys that are there.
Pay the guy that's there. Pay the guy that's developed. Pay the guy that's going to maybe be 3 years and out, that type of player. And Chase is really coming on right now. He's really impressing a lot of people. So that's one of those things where I think when we're talking about that card game earlier, I think Kirby and company go, you know what? We got a lot of players on our team that are already there, that are developing, that play with fire, passion, and energy. Passion, fire, and energy.
Fire, passion, energy.
I think it changes. Now, there's PFEs.
No, Glenn changed it earlier, but that's how Kirby's had it, yeah.
Yeah, and you're almost – I think Gruden also had passion, fire, and energy as well. So we got some copyright issues here with the T-shirt or whatever. But to me, you go after the dog in the hand rather than the dog in the bush right here. And I think, Guyton going to be a great player. I think he's probably going to have 13, 15 sacks a year in that conference they call the Big 12. But I think Georgia will still be very fine on the talent at the edge part. I just think it's very interesting how you have new players at the table each and every cycle. And it seems like we said, we've seen this movie a lot of times, Kaylee. Miami's tried to be that guy with the big wallet. USC's tried to be that guy. Texas A&M has tried to be that guy. There's some facet of roster building and team chemistry that's being missed by just holding up your paddle the longest and being the highest bidder.
Two takeaways from this entire situation. Number one, when LaDainian Guyton more than likely announces his commitment to Texas Tech tomorrow, it is not a Georgia issue. It wasn't that Georgia didn't prioritize him or spend too much time with him. I truly think that decision was completely out of their hands at that point. And then number two, there is so much talent in the 2027 edges. So one way or another, Georgia's going to end up with a really, really talented edge from that class. So, you got to just continue moving on. All right, so we're also going to move on as well. We're going to do our class breakdown. And earlier in the show, told you guys the theme for this class breakdown, or who are the two players that we think that Georgia absolutely has to keep in the class. So we'll start with the offensive side of the ball. I think Jeff and I will both agree that this whole conversation starts with Jared Curtis. Pretty much every quarterback has gone off the board. You spent so much time making sure that he felt like a priority, and he ended up with the Dawgs. So this class is led by Jared Curtis. They can't. It would be a disaster if something happened.
Yeah, because that's the one or two names here you can't lose. I think it would be universal. The only correct number one answer off the offensive side of the ball would be Jared, especially after these leaks have came out where Jared's going to make $750K his freshman year, a freshman year where we don't see freshman quarterbacks start in Athens. Do you have a number two pick on the board? Who's your number two pick on the board?
I have the running back bias, because you made it sound like Amari Latimer is still in the air, and they have to make sure that they end this cycle with a running back. I know that you have the portal and you can go and get players out of it, but we've kind of seen how that has worked out before with taking that chance on someone. So I think you absolutely have to keep Jay Lamar in this class.
I'm going to be real here for a second, Kaylee.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to be really real. Like a lot of this as a reporter, you've got to just report the news, be very objective, be very, not very partisan at all. But if you bring up Jay Lamar, and this is what the thought bubble that comes in my head, if we see that young man who cried at his commitment ceremony flip somewhere else, college football is broken. I mean, it is broken.
That's the straw that broke the camel's back.
People say like the jump the shark moment or whatever for that old Happy Days, Fonzie type stuff, but this recruiting stuff is broken. If a guy that cries at his commitment ceremony, who comes out to his commitment ceremony wearing Georgia wristbands, wearing Georgia colors or whatever, didn't want to hide it one bit, didn't want to have any sort of intrigue about it. If that guy flips, then there's a problem with college football recruiting, even though everybody else says there's already one right now. I like your pick. I got one pick here.
Okay.
I think you got to hold on to Ekene Boko.
Yeah, for sure.
Because otherwise you have zero tackles, zero guys that you could project to be an NFL prospect at tackle in this class. You got a bunch of swing guys that could play center or guard, but you really don't have a tackle. And this guy, Kaylee, he's the third highest rated player in the class right now, and he's a top 50, top 40 overall prospect. I think with a good senior year, he could go into that five-star zone, five-star lane right now. So on this side of the ball, the absolute guys that I agree with you on Curtis. I like your pick on Lamar. I'm going Ogboko there out of North Carolina. Georgia has to play ultimate defense on these two guys.
Yeah, I also, if I didn't say Jay Lamar, I think I would have gone the Ekene route as well. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I think that this is where we have a little bit more wiggle room to really lock in on the guys that we feel like are unique to this class. I can't go defensive linemen because there are currently 7 at this moment.
Wow.
I think it starts with what you said earlier with Justice Fitzpatrick, because by the time this is all said and done, more than likely Chase Calicut will not be a part of the class, so you absolutely have to sign a corner. He's a top 100 player who understands the pressure and the game of football, probably, I don't want to say more than anyone, but definitely with a lot of the guys that, Carter Lucky and stuff, who have had brothers that have played this game. So I think you absolutely have to keep Justice Fitzpatrick.
I'm glad you take that guy off the board because it makes my decision a little bit easier.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Well, first of all, little side note here, file this away, DawgNation. I think Georgia will have the best set of cornerbacks this year it's ever had for this 2025 team. You go to Melo Jones, Ellis Robinson. I hear there's a lady that works in this studio that's the president of the Dalen Everett fan club. I don't know if we can find her yet. And then you also obviously have Daniel Harris as well. So that's a good group. I think DBU is going to get even more DBU after this class. So many really good DBs right there. But you've got two guys that I think, man, they're so tough. But I'm gonna pull one off the board right now. I think you got to go Kamari Brooks. We've talked about edge. We've talked about LaDamian Guyton. We somehow built this show to make this point of you're not getting the best corner on the best edge in the country, the top of your board edge in 2027. You better make sure you lock down 2026. And really, Kaylee, if we're being totally honest with Truth Serum here, that was really the only edge Georgia wanted in this 2026 class in Kamari Brooks.
The other one is tough. This is where we can get really creative here. And at first, it used to be the safeties where I was like, do we need 8,000 safeties in this defensive class? But, I mean, this is a really talented group. But the more I have heard about Jordan Smith and the more film that I've watched on him, he's someone I'm really starting to think can get in the mix early and, like, maybe, you know, have 1 year potentially with KJ Bolden. So I don't know. There's something about Jordan Smith that gives me that we're going to be talking a lot about him whenever he comes to college. So I like Jordan Smith a lot in this group too.
Kaylee, your instincts serve you well. I was at the Corky Kell luncheon with you this week in Marietta, and the gentleman at the table, I don't think you were there. He said he looked at me and he goes, "Who's the best player here?" And I pointed to Jordan Smith.
Did you really?
I thought Jordan Smith was the best player there. Since you've moved the DB off the board, Kaylee, this other decision here, and folks, what we'd love for you to do is jump in the comments, give us your own picks. If we don't got it right, if there's somebody you like better, please let us know in the comment section below. But for me, the other guy is Valdenson. You probably knew I was going to take him. With honorable mention here for Nick Abrams II as well. But
I almost took Nick Abrams, yeah.
Those are the guys they got to hold on to. But Valden is a guy you really wonder, like, because Ohio State and Texas never got the chance to fire their – you know those things now you see at basketball games where they have
the money
guns? They never – I'm sure that's a good AI meme for somebody out there, but they never really got to shoot their guns off and to make their biggest bids in for Valdenson. But he's a guy – I keep saying it a lot. I'll stand 10 toes down on it, Kaylee. He is this one guy in this class outside of Jared Curtis that I think could go top 5 in an NFL draft one day.
So we'll move on to the special teams. I mean, obviously they need to keep both of these guys, so we don't even really have to have that discussion.
Kaylee, I'm going to be silly here. If there's a chance, the other way college football would be broken is if somebody like Texas or Texas Tech starts dropping bags for kickers.
Yeah.
Then we've got a problem.
Well, I know. I mean, Texas Tech might not back down. But it is important to note that both of them now have stars. They're both 3 stars between Wade Register and Heron Zarakat. So the fact that both the special team specialists have stars, like, that says a lot about that group in particular.
Number 1 punter and number 1 kicker in the country. Hard to do better than that.
All right, and then we'll go to our class breakdown. So a few changes. You've got 31 commits now. They go back up to 1 after the Anthony Lonon decision, and then with that, there are now 16 in-state commits for the 2026 class. Right, so now we will move on to the top targets, which is becoming slim pickings each and every week. We talked about Tyler and Amari earlier in the show, but now you've got a new name on the list, 3-star offensive lineman Fletcher Turk.
Uncommitted. He's a guy that Georgia gave an official visit to over the summer. He's at Ebron Christian. He's going to take it slow, Kaylee. He's not in any hurry he's focusing on his senior year. He's not in any hurry with his decision. Georgia's in the mix there. And then, you mentioned Slim Pickens. These are not George Pickens type players here, but these are the type, I think if you chapter back to the beginning of our show, if you're just catching us, go back to the beginning of our show. We have a lot of discussion there about Tyler Big Chew. Georgia's trying to flip a 290-pound Gator out of Douglasville. We'll wait and see on that. He's going to let Georgia give it its best shot. And then also you've got Amari Latimer, guy big-time running back out of Sandy Creek, very strong, very proud GHSA program there, known for a lot of its players, currently committed to Wisconsin. Kaylee is on team. I want 2 high school running backs. We'll see if Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, and Josh Crawford are also on that team by the end of the season. So
with that, we'll begin to wrap up today's show. Jeff, any final thoughts before we head out?
Protect your kickers. Don't let the bags get dropped on them. Jay Lamar and Jared Curtis must be protected at all costs, amongst other people in this class. I think that's big 2027 news. I'm glad we got to rack it up and talk about it. And Anthony Lonon certainly is going to be a special dog in Athens.
All right. Thank you so much, DawgNation, for joining us here on this Wednesday on today's episode of Before the Hedges. We will catch you right back here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
Let's go, I'm a bulldog. So Georgia, who I'm picking. I love the family atmosphere and the way they handle business. Education is important.